Back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our united progressive movement. I'm so honored today to be with Mike Broihier. Mike is a farmer, a retired Marine, and a Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate in Kentucky. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's really fun to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'm very honored to have you on. I wanted to start off before we get into what we normally do on this program, which is discussing people's top political priorities. I wanted to know a little bit more about your background. What inspired you to be able to run for the Senate?
Two, well, I don't know if those are discrete questions, but I um, I'm a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel. I'm married to a Marine, another Marine officer. So you can imagine how hard our son's life was having a mom and a dad, both in the Marines. But when I retired from the Marine Corps back in 2005, my wife and I decided we want to be farmers,
Hmm.
and neither of us had ever farmed before, and we didn't have a history of farming in our families, so. We just dove into it. We bought a lot of books and did our research and ended up getting a farm in Kentucky. And this might seem like the beginning of a trend here where we make decisions and dive in. And that was kind of how we came about running for office. But my background in the Marine Corps started off, I'm an artilleryman, but I had started off in the early 80s in Okinawa, Japan, and mainland Japan, Korea, places like that. Did a tour with a Marine Expeditionary Unit, Special Operations Capable Unit in the Mediterranean aboard ship. Um, Commanded a couple artillery batteries in 29 Palms, California, and it went to Mogadishu 92, 93 as a rifle company commander during the Somali Civil War. And 2000, 2002, I was the Marine Corps war planner in Korea, and I finished up my last tour was teaching school at UC Berkeley, and that's where I met my wife.
Oh, well,
So
that's awesome. Well, first, I want to say thank you for your service, not only for being the service that you did in the armed forces, but also for being a farmer. I think we undervalue just the farmers of our country and thanking them. We're not going to get food in our stomachs without the farmers of our nation. So, thank you so much for being able to do that as well after your service. So, I wanted to start on your first topic, a just transition to a green economy. I first wanted to know, how did this become your top priority?
Well, it's living here in Kentucky. I mean, seeing so we've had this extractive economy here in Kentucky for 200 years. First, it was timber, and then after timber, it became coal. And literally, the coal from Kentucky and from the other Appalachian coal-producing states. There's eight of us. Um, we built the great cities of America. We
Yeah.
built the railroads of America. And now that coal's running out and people don't have a need for it anymore, we're left holding the economic and environmental bag, literally. And so that's and talking to coal miners, I had an interesting experience. Just so I don't hope you don't mind me asking.
Mhm.
I mean, these are going to be deep dives into this, so I can tell long shaggy dog stories.
Yeah, go right ahead. I have as much time as you do.
Well, it probably didn't make news where you were, but there was a mine out in Harlan County, Kentucky, called the Black Jewel Mine, and non-union mine, and they got paid on a Friday and let go, and come Monday morning, their checks started bouncing, and the Black Jewel Mine had clawed back their pay over the weekend, and so not only were these mostly men out of jobs, but they had bounced checks all over town for their mortgage, their car payments, their rent, and so literally they'd work for 2 weeks for this coal company for free, and so they decided that there was going to be if no there was no pay, there was going to be no coal, and they went and physically put themselves on the railroad tracks, the spur coming out of the Black Jewel Mine, and it was so I went out to join them, and I had just declared for my candidacy. I just went out and checked in with the strike boss and said, "Hey, I just want to hang out with you guys, and I don't, just want to be here with you." So it was great. I got to spend a whole day just talking to these guys, talking to their families, talking to other people in the community, and you know they're not in love with digging coal. I mean, they're not dumb people. They used to dig coal seams that were as high as this room, 10 feet high, and now they're down to 18 inches.
Wow.
And they can literally see the writing on the wall, and they are begging, um, they're begging for to be pulled forward into this century with good jobs, with green jobs, and not to have to bear the economic burden of the past 2 centuries. And that day was very transformative. And I hope I'm not sounding pedantic, but it really was. I mean,
Yeah.
so towards the end of the day, the railroad company CSX had come in and say, "Could we please get our engines out?" And the strikers said, "You can have your engines back, but not a bit of coal." So at the end of the day, we were all blocking the tracks, and the engines came out of the mine, not carrying any coal cars, and it was great. I mean, there was a bunch of old UMW guys there, and like I said, the Black Jewel mine was not unionized. And these old UMW guys, I talked to them earlier in the day, and I'd asked them, I said, why are you here? What's your interest in this? And this one old timer grabbed me by the arm and he said, son, he said, this isn't about unionized labor. He said, this is about labor and
Mm.
dignity for the men and women. And I'll tell you, Johnny, I mean, literally put chills down my spine. And I'm like, all right, this is the right place at the right time. And so all the folks really, I'm talking Appalachia specifically, but Kentucky in general, all they want is justice.
Mm.
You know, why should we build the great cities of this and bridges and railroads in this country and have our economy and our ecology destroyed, and then when it's done, people just be allowed to walk away? And that's how I got to that point. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great inspiration for why this became such a top priority. And I strongly recommend more often that we take these strike measures to be able to actually get action done. Because unfortunately, unless you can impact their bottom line by your resistance, they're not going to try and go your way. So I wanted to talk about some of the solutions that you have to be able to help us towards that goal. Given that you said you are a farmer yourself, you know that the agriculture industry commits 9% of current emissions to our environment currently of fossil fuels. What do you think is the plan to have agriculture be a leader in terms of climate change?
Well, I think you've got to draw a distinct line between industrial agriculture and agriculture
Mm.
or family farms. And I think more important to our immediate situation, and I'll get to the second part of it later, but is food security. And with the coronavirus, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to visit a store, but I mean, with our global supply chain and just in time logistics, we are 2 days away from being out of food. Now, in an economy where you've got family farms and small farms, which are unique, they're very, very diversified. They have a way smaller ecological footprint. You kind of get to both aspects of it. You improve the environment, and you have higher food security. You get a lot of genetic diversity in your food. I mean, the industrial farms and man, you just give me the high sign if I'm lecturing, but you've got a topic. I mean, seriously, man, you've
Oh
got a
no,
topic
you're
that
the
I love.
expert. This is why I wanted to bring it up. So, how do
Uh,
we encourage more small farms compared to these industrialized farms?
well, and I think we're going to talk about UBI in a little while. But I think the first step is acknowledging how much food costs. Right? I know dairy farmers, like they're personal friends of mine, and a gallon of milk shouldn't cost 88 cents in the supermarket. Judging by how much work goes into it. I mean, I can't imagine that you can package it and put it on the shelf for 88 cents. Now, I understand the concept of loss leaders, and I know why the supermarkets put the milk in the back corner. But I think there's a fundamental disconnect between people and their food, and that you don't see in other countries. I don't know how much you travel, but there are a lot of places in Europe where people shop for their food every day. It's not a long shopping trip, but basically what you're cooking tonight is what's in the market today. And I think people are more intimately tied to their food and supply chain. Where here, you can go to the big box store and stock up on frozen food for a month, and so we have a fundamental disconnect between the two. Um, so family farms. I don't want to really go too far into UBI, but something like a UBI would give the padding that family farms need to survive taking a hit or a bad crop season or something like that, and it would allow parents to pass their farm on to their children and children to opt to farm if they want to. A good friend of mine ran for Kentucky Agriculture Secretary this year, 2019, a guy named Haley Conway. And his family has been farming in Kentucky since, basically since the Revolutionary War. But he and his son both who want to be farmers, have got to work other full-time jobs just to farm at night, which is what they love nothing more than farming, but they farm in the dark. I don't know if you're familiar with the term FFA, Future Farmers of America.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the joke is that stands for Father Farms Alone.
Oh.
And it's a sad joke, but it's
Yeah.
very, very accurate. So, I mean, in our particular situation, as a retired Marine, we get a small monthly retirement, and for us, that is the buffer. That's how we can survive and do the thing that we love and feed ourselves and our friends and our neighbors and our community. But no one else, very few people have got that kind of insulation that we do, that we enjoy.
Mm.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, yes, you did. One question I had, you were mentioning how we don't really have real prices for a lot of these like goods, like milk, as you mentioned. Do you support something like carbon pricing so that we can try and factor in those prices? And furthermore, what do you think we should be doing for some level of like corporate accountability? Like carbon pricing is a form of corporate accountability.
It is, and I hate to say it because that the burden of that will be passed on to the consumer.
Hmm.
But and it's the same question about if we stop subsidizing the oil and gas industry, the argument for subsidizing the oil and gas industry is that it keeps the price steady for consumers. But that being said, there's a lot to be found in honesty for people to know how much a gallon of milk is worth and what actually goes into the juice that you're feeding your children. And of course, when you farm the industrial level, when and this is happening in Kentucky. Like if you go to Western Kentucky, it looks more like Iowa and Nebraska than it does Kentucky. I mean, giant industrial farms, thousands, 5,000 acre farms in corn and soybeans, but they are one DNA slip, one genetic error away from, it's a monoculture. Everyone farms the same thing. All of it comes from Monsanto, and it is one oops in seed stock, and people are going hungry. And so that's why I think that whatever we have to do to buoy family farms and small farms and community farms and keeping the production of food local will add to our food security and reduce these giant footprints that the industrial farms have.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. One other thing that you had mentioned, kind of in that same example of milk, is you have to think about the transportation cost of getting it from point A to B. You're not having all of our goods being produced super locally. What do you think could be done to help reform our transportation systems to help our climate situation as well?
Well, I'm a fan of trains. I love trains.
I love trains too.
Other than, I think if you go per ton, I think by sea is for long haul, by sea is the cheapest way to move things. But intercontinentally, I'm a big fan of trains. And if you've ever ridden the Amtrak, you'll see, you find out that the Amtrak is sitting on a siding while some freight car goes rumbling by at 10 miles an hour because the rails are owned locally. And I don't know how many independent, it's got to be in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So we do not have a national rail infrastructure system. If you've ever, you could fly into Frankfurt in Germany and literally without leaving the airport, you walk over to the train and take a train to Paris and switch trains and then be in London without ever going above ground. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Without ever leaving your train. And like I said, I'm a fan of trains, and I'm a fan of the economy of trains, and I'm not waving the flag to nationalize everything. But if I was going to nationalize anything, it would be our rail infrastructure, and get away from this privatized system where the local owner sets the priority and sets the prices. Because I think it's a key part of our infrastructure, just like the interstate highway system was planned to be part of our national defense. So should the rail system.
I am thrilled to hear you say that. I completely agree with that point of view, and I'd love to be able to go across the country without needing to take a plane. I'd love to be able to take a train. It's just so much more reliable and steady. You don't have to have all that anxiety as well. I wanted to ask you one final question on the subject of climate change before we get
Sure.
into your second top priority, which is just energy in general. There's a lot of different forms of energy. Which do you try to prioritize, and does your list of energies include nuclear power?
Um, you know, it's funny when you're campaigning, you get all kinds of very, very specific questions. And people write me and say, "What do you think about using barium salts for producing nuclear energy?" I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I don't know. you know, so you look at whatever it was at Google, and the half life is only measured like 1,200 or 1,500 years, vice 20 or 30,000 is like, this sounds like a less bad alternative.
Yeah.
But I think any energy we produce that leaves possibly deadly um, residuals, like say beyond our grandchildren, we shouldn't do. And so I like obviously I like wind and solar. And there's many, it used to be a news item when a company like Germany, an industrialized nation, or Scotland would run for a full day on renewable energy. And now it's not even a news item because they do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I've had a great conversation with a guy in New York who funded an energy storage plant in England, a demonstration plant that has been running for like 7 years. And the demonstration project cost 10 million bucks, and they are running a small city off solar. And people say, well, when the sun stops shining, of course, you don't have power. With this demonstration project, they're able to store enough energy to last for several days of no sun. And if you add wind in, um, we could make ourselves energy independent with like zero carbon footprint. And the less emissions, in my order of priorities, the least toxic and the shortest lasting are at the very, very top. And for me, that's wind and solar.
Yeah, I totally agree that those do need to be prioritized. I do wonder if we need to use it like a transitionary fuel because we are going to be needing to get rid of fossil fuels. But I do agree with you that we need solar and wind as the highest of priorities. So we're going to take a very quick break and we're going to be right back talking about affordable healthcare with Mike.